Hello. Hope everyone at home is well today. Well, this evening we have something exciting for you. Oh, actually, I forgot I should say Happy New Year. It's 2026. Wishing you all the best for a very good year ahead. So, this is our first BSL Blethers of the year. It's January. So, we thought today we would talk about deaf clubs all across the UK. And we're going to talk about the sort of stories and the memories we all have of deaf clubs because they played such a significant part in our lives everywhere in the UK. So we thought we'd have an opportunity to look back. We know that some deaf clubs are still going, some deaf clubs unfortunately have fallen by the wayside. So we've invited some friends along to talk tonight about our memories, to share those memories, and to just compare different memories from different parts of the country. And I hope you're going to enjoy this session. I hope it will spark some memories for you. And if you have any questions or comments, remember that you're more than welcome to post them and we will ask them on your behalf. So now it's the time to invite our first guest, who is James. James, join us. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Coming
Hello.
along tonight. Could you introduce yourself and tell us your name and where you're from, which deaf club?
Yes, my name is James, and I'm from Kilmarnock. And this is the sign for it, Kilmarnock.
Kilmarnock Deaf Club. Lovely. I'm going to ask you more about that later, James. But in the meantime, thanks for coming. And I'll invite our second guest to join us now. Margaret, would you like to come on screen?
Hi.
Hello, Margaret. Hi. Would you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and where you're from.
Yes, I am Margaret, and I'm from Kilmarnock too.
So the same deaf club, Kilmarnock Deaf Club. Great.
Yes.
That's
yes.
lovely. And now I'd like to invite our third guest. So we've got James and Margaret from Kilmarnock. And I'd like to invite our third guest, who is Alison. Alison, could you join us? Hello. Hi, could you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, which deaf club? Hi, I'll give you my name first, should I? I'm Alison, and I'm from Leeds, or Leeds, or Leeds. There are so many signs for the place I'm from. Which sign do you prefer? Well, I think for most of us, it's the fingerspell pattern, Leeds, or this one, Leeds. Well, there's plenty to choose from there. Thanks for coming tonight. And it's great that you've joined us because I know that you've been lifelong members of your local deaf clubs and deaf clubs hold a special place in your heart. James, could you talk to us a little bit about Kilmarnock Deaf Club? Did you have a role there? Were you a member of the committee and how long were you involved there?
Well, it all started when I first went to the deaf club. And I ended up going at the age of 15. It was my father who brought me along. So he brought me in, and I didn't really know what it was going to be like, but there were all these older men smoking pipes, wearing their flat caps. And I stood behind my father, really nervous. I couldn't make eye contact with anybody. And he actually pushed me out in front of him. And then all these people started chatting away to me in sign language, and I couldn't get over all these other deaf people in a room with me. And that's where it started.
So that was the start of your journey, looking at all these older people in their suits and their flat caps and their pipes, finger spelling, I expect, at that time, were they?
Very formally dressed in those days. They had their blazers and their ties, and the smell of their pipes was
and the smoke.
very overwhelming when I first went in. And, then they would come over and they would show me what they had. And then they were chatting to each other. It was just fascinating. But I stuck behind my father, and my father kept trying to push me forward. But I was shocked at all these very confident deaf men all signing away to each other. That was the introduction that I had to the deaf club.
And so you're now the chair, is that right, James?
I started at the age of 16 in the deaf club, and Then I started playing football. That was a good way in. I mean, I hadn't played with a team like that before, and they got me involved. I played football, did different bits and pieces. And then the whole Ayrshire area I went to. And then there was the Scottish Deaf Cup and all of those competitions and so many opportunities to meet and mix with people, which were just fantastic. Then I took on the role of being the rep for all sorts of different things. I was involved on the committee, working with the sports teams, all sorts of different roles over the years. We played pool, table pool in the club, and I eventually got involved in that. And I played for Ards and Prestwick in those days as well.
Prestwick,
And then I learned a lot from that as a young guy, and I learned from them, the other players. There were fees associated that I didn't know about, but I had to learn about all that too. That was part of being part of a club. And, I'd always thought that I couldn't be part of competitions. That's what I've been brought up to believe. But then as well as that, because I was young, the other sporting clubs I wasn't allowed to go to because they drank alcohol, but we didn't have that in the Deaf Club at those days. But anyway, I then, got a wee can and brought that in with me, and that was okay. And they told me it would be okay. And then it started with all of those sports. It was fabulous. Then I started playing bowls, and I really got into the bowls, and I played competitively there. The South and then the East and all the different regions would come together. And it was just fantastic sport playing bowls. So many happy memories of that.
And now you're chairman now, yeah.
Yes, I took on the chair's role, which is a 3-year tenure. And then after 3 years, I thought, other people were staying doing different things. I took on another stint and another one and another one. And it should have been 3 years, but everybody wanted me to stay. So I ended up staying in that role for many years.
And are you doing it now, James?
What I do notice about the Deaf Club is that attendance is dwindling. And I think that you should be other people ready to take on those responsibilities of joining the committees, but I'm not seeing that. So that's why I've stayed on as chair all these years.
So you've been in the committee for, well, how many years now then, James?
Whoa.
Altogether?
I mean, I started the committee at 18.
And how about you, Margaret? Margaret, how long? Over 60 years.
For me, it would be over 60 years, James saying. Over 60. I still have a passion for it, though. I do. Because I want people to realize how much they can get from being part of the Deaf Club. That's why.
It's very important. Yeah, it's very important. Wow, James, over 60 years. That's phenomenal. And Margaret, can you tell us how you got involved with your Deaf Club?
Well, look, I grew up in a family where everybody else was deaf, so going to the Deaf Club for me was natural and normal. But I can remember what James is talking about, going in and all the men in their pipes. But I would go upstairs and you would see the men up there and watch them all, all sitting there smoking their pipes. And I can remember saying to my mum, what they're doing, and all the ladies sitting in a different row and all in their bloomers, and you could sort of see the bloomers, and asking my mum what was going on, because they were very old-fashioned ladies, in those days. And I can remember as a young girl being spoken to, and then they would say to me, "Tell us what your name is." And because I was a young deaf child and I was able to tell them my name, I remember them saying, "Oh, she's so clever, isn't she?" And then giving me a wee 6-penny coin or a 3-penny coin. And I was all so pleased with myself because I could fingerspell my name. They gave me a wee coin. And that was just lovely.
That's fab. That's great. Oh, sorry, Margaret, go on.
And then I can remember at Christmas, Santa coming out, and it was always a deaf Santa who could sign. And, everybody always used to say, "Oh, deaf Santa." But for me, that's what I would have expected, because in my family, everybody was deaf. So why wouldn't Santa be deaf?
And did you take any roles on the committee or anything like that?
Yeah, secretary, treasurer, I think probably over 40 years, 40. It's different roles, different times, maybe had a few years out here and there, but yeah.
So, wow, 60 years for James, 40 years for you, Margaret. That's fantastic. And, well done to both of you for kind of sticking with it. And come on, do you own the building as well? Is it owned by the Deaf Club?
Mhm.
Great.
Mhm.
Well, we'll come back to that later, I think. Alison, can I just talk to you a little bit about Leeds? What's happening? What's the situation in Leeds, and how did you get involved? Oh, well, a bit like Margaret, really. I come from a deaf family, so I think I probably first went to the deaf club in my pram, as a wee baby. But I was also the secretary. I used to play whist. I used to, I don't know, I was involved in the deaf club committee. I was involved in the ball games. I used to do all the kind of card game stuff, and I don't know. I think it's just been part of my life. Some things I've dropped and then come back to different activities here and there. But yeah, throughout my life, really. And do you own it as well? Yeah, yeah. I mean, it used to be very big. It used to be in a very big building. We sold that off. We had to wait for 7 years until we found our new premises where we are now, which is a much smaller building. I mean, I still miss that beautiful old space, but where we are now is fine, and we own it. So you come from a deaf family, and did all of your family traditionally go to the deaf club? Oh yeah, my grandparents and everyone, they were all on the committee. They'd have meetings every week. The deaf club was open 6 days a week, Saturday, Sunday. So I mean, obviously it's open less frequently now. It's a little bit different to how it was. But there were a lot more people attending, and the attendance has dropped a little now. So, Margaret, was your deaf club open all the way through the week or 6 days a week? How frequently was your deaf club open,
It
Kilmarnock?
used to be on a Saturday, and then weekends, and then Tuesday. So most days, but not
4 days
now.
a week.
Now
And how
it's
many is it
only
now?
1 day a week, and then you get an afternoon. Evenings, it's not so much opening now. People get home early. In the afternoons, you get a better turnout when it is open.
Okay. So, Margaret, you were saying, there are lots of members at the deaf club before. I mean, can you estimate how many that would be? 50, 60 or?
Yeah, I would say 50 to 60. Yeah, really brilliant numbers. I mean, I can remember that we had a dinner dance, and there were crowds would come to that, maybe 150 for a dinner dance
Wow.
in Ayr, and then the ones from Glasgow would come to be with us as well, and we had fabulous social events. And tickets were organised by ourselves.
2.5p for a ticket, two and
Yeah,
six. Wow.
that's what it was, 2 and 6. So we thought that was really dear in those days. So we thought it was a lot of money, but that was every year. And we got the turnout for those big events as well. I wish that were still happening.
So, how many members have you got now, Margaret, roughly?
25, yeah. Kilmarnock and Ayr together, they actually had to amalgamate. I would say it would be about 70 altogether. Yeah. But
But 25 now.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
25, 30.
25, 30. Yeah, yeah.
But it's great that it's continuing. Alison, what are the figures from Leeds? Well, we had different groups. The Deaf Club had its own members, but we also had the 50 Plus Club, which had its own members. And so our membership was kind of segregated. The 50 Plus Club still has good numbers. I think over 40 regular attendees there. But the Evening Deaf Club is different. I couldn't give you figures for that, but I think their membership has declined a little bit. But I suppose people have, it depends if there's something going on like quiz night or something like that, then bingo, is very popular. So things like that will bring in a bigger crowd, but it varies between the different groups. And was it well attended before? Oh yeah, but because we have all of these different groups, the football group and the table games and so on, they all had different memberships, but that's changed now, and I think it's very different for each of them.
I mean,
Margaret, you were going
I
to say
can
something?
remember in our time in Kilmarnock, it used to be like a really big club, and then Ayrshire had its own club, and then we would have met up for indoor games, and then it became competitive between people from the two different clubs. And that was fun in those days. I can remember the ones from Derby coming as well. And they were, with great competitions, really good competitive spirit. And then it was fabulous. Great memories there.
So Leeds, were you very competitive as well? Who were your main rivals? We did a lot of indoor games. We did a lot of that. Yorkshire Humberside sport. So there's a lot of rivalry locally because we'd have weekly fixtures. And I think there were about 20, 25 deaf clubs across Yorkshire at that time. So we were always, away or at home with one competition or another. I think now there are about 5 deaf clubs left across Yorkshire. So what was your deaf club's strength? Pool, darts? What was your most popular thing? Football, right? I'm thinking for Kilmarnock, is that right?
For you lot, yeah, it would have been football. Yes, we played football a lot. And also snooker. And we played against lots of other clubs, lots of matches. Bowls then really took off, and there was a lot went on with that. But again, with the sports, the numbers are dropping too. And I could talk about the Campbell Trophy, Paisley. We used to play indoor games against each other, and that was really competitive. It was an annual event, and we loved that.
What about you, Alison? Football, cricket, indoor games, those 3 were our main ones. But the football kind of changed because we amalgamated with a hearing club. So that kind of became a little bit more towards professional level. And so people who weren't quite so good, who would normally get a run out before, then couldn't any longer. So that sort of changed a little bit. And the hearing, those people who went with the hearing amalgamated club don't really come to the deaf club anymore. But people from Leeds would travel a lot, I think, to other clubs and other venues to play their games. So less coming into the club now. Well, we've got some old photos that we'd love to share with our viewers. So let's show the ones from Kilmarnock first, shall we?
Yeah.
Hang on a second, James. Let's just have a look at the photos before you come in and comment on them. Thank you. Wow, those are fabulous, beautiful old photos. Such a delight to see them. Margaret and James, can you tell us a little bit about what we've just seen? You had a missioner, is that right, who ran the club? Tell us more about that. Did you have a missioner as well at Leeds? We did. I think most people did, didn't they? Most clubs did. Tell us a little bit about the management of the club in those days, James.
Okay, so there was one down. It was James Paul in one of the photographs who was involved in founding the Kilmarnock Deaf Club and was involved for many years. And then it was handed over to the missioner Keeler, who was there for 40 years.
40 years, wow.
Before he then retired. And then he was given a trophy in memory of the good work that he'd done and the hard work and out and about visiting people, bringing them into the club. So I remember him. He was a great man. I can also remember as well that in those days, they used to go into the houses a lot on pastoral visits. And I remember they used to visit us at home as deaf people.
That wouldn't happen now, would it?
He was great, particularly the Reverend, at helping people get jobs as well, because he would give them little tasks in the deaf club. And, if if he wanted people to do things, then he would have had little bits of money as well that he would have handed out to people for carrying out jobs around the clubs and help them get work eventually.
So you had a missioner this as well in Leeds, did you? Yeah, we had missioners. We had Newbie Hudson, who was a really strong. We're involved in the BDA quite a lot as well. And we also we had flats in Scarborough, the Hudson Flats. But there was a lot of assistance. His wife made cakes, all kinds of things. So, I mean, they didn't stop really. It was a 24/7 kind of job, I think. If anybody got arrested, the police would call him and he'd come out and, you know, advocate for them and get everything sorted out. They kind of gave a lot of emotional comfort. I mean, 7 or 8 deaf people at one time got arrested for fighting, and he went and calmed them down and hugged them, and so they were on duty the whole time, really running that space. Yeah, I mean, deaf clubs, as you say, used to kind of arrange for jobs. I mean, I remember my own father, you know, people would get jobs without interpreters. They just kind of say on Friday, well, you're starting on Monday. So there was no kind of application, interview, anything like that in those days. You just, a job was found for you and you start.
I know, because actually they didn't interpret, they spoke on our behalf and they made it easy. It was very easy. Whereas nowadays, I think deaf people are often put off by the application process because there's forms and all that kind of thing, and it seems much more lengthy.
Yeah, it's very different now, isn't it? Very competitive now, whereas it was, I mean, there used to be lots of jobs. I mean, I think my father had about 20 different jobs, but now it's really difficult to find even one, isn't it? People apply for so many jobs before they get one. So let's, in the photo, there were lots of wonderful trophies there. Can you tell us a bit more about the trophies that we saw in the photos?
Well, the BDA initially started to talk about dementia as a subject. And I went to a workshop and I thought that was really helpful. So I started to do some work around dementia within the Deaf Club. And then from that, I learned to put photographs up because that became a stimulus for people to have conversations and gave them something positive they could refer to.
That's good for people with dementia, but also for, our ordinary viewers who can remember, some of those trophies and some of the trips they made to games and things. It's great for conversation. Same in Leeds. Yeah, I mean, when we moved our premises, a lot of the trophies were hidden. So it was really lovely to get those back out on view. And there'll be some Leeds people watching me today, so I better be careful what I say. But it's really important to have those on display, I think, because they're part of our history, aren't they? Our living heritage.
Absolutely, I would agree with that.
And it's useful, isn't it, for deaf people to come and to be able to show visitors as well.
And it's a conversation starter as well, because sometimes it's seeing those things helps you think, do you remember this happened? And then we all get involved in the conversation. Wonderful.
That's right. And I think it's good for young people as well to see what used to happen in the past. It's part of kind of role modeling for them to understand their own history.
And the photographs that we have that we had showed there, we had a photograph. One of the photographs was the committee with the elders, and you could see there were a lot of people involved. And then those meetings were held once a month. And then the elders met with the committee and they would have chatted to each other and had meetings, and everything ran really smoothly. It's just so hard nowadays because the numbers are so small.
And there's no elders from the church, I'm assuming. Because there used to be, most deaf clubs were next to a church or had a church upstairs in the building.
Yeah.
Do you still have that at Leeds?
Yeah, upstairs.
Yeah, at Leeds, we had 2 churches, a Roman Catholic and a Protestant. And they had their own spaces within the deaf club. But now that's amalgamated into one. And when we moved to our smaller premises, there's now no longer any religion, in the building. when I was baptized, the deaf club was next to the church, so we could film the baptism.
Yeah,
Did you have your weddings and things in the church,
same
in the
memories.
deaf club
Absolutely.
church?
I got married in the deaf church. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Upstairs
lovely.
in the building. Absolutely. And because my parents weren't deaf, bringing them into the deaf environment was lovely. Then they came in and then they saw all the sign language, and it was just lovely. It was a smaller church, but such strong memories. That's where I got married.
That's lovely.
And the minister was Kerry, the same gentleman I was talking about earlier on.
And Margaret?
Yes, I was baptized as a baby upstairs in the church for deaf people.
Alison? My mother and father's wedding reception was in the deaf club. So did you have parties, birthday parties? Yeah, my 21st, my 40th, both were in the deaf club.
I think you had that as well. Didn't you have your 50th in the deaf club? Yeah.
There used to be lots of parties, didn't there, in the deaf clubs, wedding receptions, that kind of thing. But now they tend to be at outside
Mhm,
venues or at pubs or,
mhm,
mainstream venues. And the deaf club was either free or it was cheap, and it became a kind of community event, didn't it? And the committee used to oversee that, but it's very much changed now. I mean, deaf weddings, I think I've been to a couple in the deaf club. And football, people who kind of met each other through football, then got married in the deaf church. My father got married there. So my mum was a staunch churchgoer. um you know
mhm.
and I think it used to be that there was a lot of pressure on deaf people, peer pressure, wasn't there, to go along to the church because everybody went.
And before you got married, you used to have to go and speak to the minister, and the minister would tell you you had to go to church really regularly to get married in the church. Oh, that's the way they talked to us in those
That's
days.
it, absolutely. You had to be a regular attender, so you definitely had to go. Yeah, my mum told me that if she missed Sunday, the reverend would come to the house and say, your son didn't come to church, or you didn't come to church, there's something wrong. James.
When we were about to get married, there wasn't any minister. Those because Kerry resigned just around that time, and I had to think who could marry us. So I went over to the minister's house, and he was there, and he'd already retired at this stage. And when I explained the situation, you know, I asked if he would still do it for me, and he agreed that he would. And he came back in for our wedding, got himself all garbed up
Oh,
in the gown and everything to do it.
that's beautiful. They used to be, didn't they? They used to kind of sign and everything, and
Yeah.
when they went, they weren't replaced. I think that was a financial thing, wasn't it?
Yes, James MacDonald came in after that, and then spoke in the church and did the preaching and all that kind of thing. But that's all stopped now. Mhm.
Alison? Yeah, West Yorkshire, we have a lady who can sign, or started learning to sign 30 years ago, and she conducted the
Mhm.
service at my father's funeral, and she was great. Well, we've got a question come in, talking about from Paulus, talking about the different activities. So Norwich Deaf Club played German whist drive, they had speed pool and chase the king. What kind of things did you have? Thank you, Paulus. What kind of things did you have at your deaf club? Did you play dominoes or anything like that?
Well, back in the early days, we played chess, but in our club, it wasn't as popular. For us, it was there were 5 different ones, but my father and then others sometimes would have played. There were 3 or 4 games that would have been played. And
Good.
nowadays, there's no real interest in chess.
So there were all deaf men that you mentioned there. So there are no women involved in that. Did you play whist or bingo instead or anything like that?
Yes, some people did whist, but not bingo. I mean, yes, that's but bingo still is played. It's very common still being played. Yeah.
Bingo seems to be the most popular, doesn't it? Still is.
No, well, chess. There were lots of tournaments around the chess, and then I can remember your father and playing bingo at the club. And then I think they competed against other teams from abroad, for example, Germany, and that was a big area of interest for many years.
And Holland as well. Yeah, Sheffield Deaf Club had a deaf chess club, and it was really well attended. I think they did lots of competitions against hearing clubs as well. It's interesting, isn't it? Most deaf clubs seem to have their own strength, snooker or whist or um so I think Leeds Deaf Club. Let's have a look at the photos from Leeds. Here we go. Wow, those are amazing. And to see your family as well, Alison, so lovely from generation to generation. Tell us a little bit about that. It seems to be snooker was quite popular at your club. Yeah, when I was little, my mother wasn't working because she was looking after me. And then as she got older, she would clean the deaf club 4 days a week. Um, and there's another cleaner as well, and they would take it shifts, kind of Monday, Tuesday, alternate days. And then at the weekends and in the school holidays, I would go with my mum, you know, and while she was cleaning, I would just kind of have a go at playing snooker. And I'd practice and practice. And yeah, I got quite good. I mean, it was awkward to begin with, but when I went to boarding school, it was girls and boys dormitories. The boys had snooker tables and the girls didn't. So I was gutted. You weren't allowed to go across to the boys, of course. So about 14, 15, I knew I could play. So I challenged some of the deaf club boys, and I can remember challenging Kilmarnock Deaf Club, and then thinking a girl playing snooker, but yeah, I beat the first round, second round, third round, and they all began to go, oh, girls can play. So yeah, it was amazing. But all that practice I did while my mum was cleaning. Oh, that's a lovely story. So snooker and pool was really quite important for many deaf clubs, I think. And when the deaf clubs had to sell a lot of their larger buildings, they had to sell a lot of their snooker tables as well, didn't they, to move into smaller premises? Do you remember that?
Absolutely. So I played snooker in the Ayrshire area. We loved it, and there were maybe 6, 7 players, and we played a lot, and we played across Scotland and Aberdeen, Glasgow. We travelled, Cardiff, everywhere. We went everywhere just to play snooker, and it was a sport we loved. But it just fizzled out over the years, and I have great memories, but it's not there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you saw in the photos my grandfather was in there, um, and they would compete against hearing people. He had his own cue in a metal case, which was locked and named and held in that. Everybody had their name on it, and they had different tops on the cues, and they would maintain them very carefully. They would take 2 or 3 different topped cues to each match, and he would spend time cleaning them very carefully. Um, and also, he'd sit on the bus with his cue going to the deaf club. I mean, it looked like, he'd rather hold on to his cue, I think, than hold on to the bus. So you told us earlier a story before we came on about your grandfather ironing the bays of the table. Oh, yeah. He would iron it, he would brush it, and actually he'd get quite a lot of dust off it. You'd be surprised. He'd get the dust off, and then he'd iron it, and then he'd remark it very carefully, draw the lines across very carefully to freshen up. Oh yeah. And there were three tables, three snooker tables and one pool table. And then, of course, when we moved, the first image that you saw was the bigger, older deaf club. But of course, it was too expensive to maintain when membership and attendance started to decline. So we had to sell it for 7 years. We didn't have a club. And then we got a nice club, but it's much smaller. So it can't house all of the equipment we had in the old one. My grandfather, I think, 674, I think, something like that. My grandfather used to do all that maintenance. And then at 76, the deaf club started to decline. But they used to have their own room. And I can remember when I was very, very small, I can remember going there. And we would have church in the deaf club. It was a really fabulous club. We used to go all the time for all kinds of activities. Yeah, there were lots of kind of hands-on things, weren't there? Lots of handmade things in deaf clubs. People make some deaf clubs made their own bars and those kinds of things. Oh yeah, yeah. And I had my 21st birthday there and my 40th. James, do you want to add something there?
Yes, you were talking about the bays on the snooker tables and how it was maintained. In Ayr, there was a guy whose job it was to do that.
To iron the tables, wow.
And we would go in, 7 o'clock and be ready for it. And we were all at 7 o'clock and even wanting to go and play. And he wouldn't let us near the table until he had finished his job. And he had a particular iron that he used. And he would spit on it to check it was hot enough.
That's right. I remember that.
Run it along the base of the snooker table. And we had to wait. We weren't allowed to touch that table until he had got it meticulous. He was so detailed in his preparation. And then he would tell us when we were allowed to come in. Then we had a board that we all put our names on, and then we all took turns. But that's a very strong memory, the ironing of the table and getting it ready.
Fabulous. I noticed in your photos, Alison, that Princess Diana is there. Yeah, she came along to have a look around our club. And that's when BSL was starting to be taught, at the very start of that. And so she came along and she was fabulous. She learned loads. And I was gutted that, I couldn't go while she was having her lessons because I was at boarding school. I'm not quite sure when she started. And I think she went then to Durham and she met Clark. And I'm not sure what the transition was between Leeds and Durham for her. I'm not sure about that. Glasgow Deaf Club, I'm sure you can remember Princess Diana opened that.
Mm-hmm.
She came along. Do you remember, James?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think she visited quite a few deaf clubs. I mean, at that time, I was something like 21, 22. I was really keen on badminton, a little badminton player. And Princess Diana came along when I was playing badminton. And it was just amazing. Her charm she just melt the room. She was fabulous. You could feel it when she came into the room. It was so exciting. Yes, and I went to the BDA Congress in Brighton, and we were all outside having our photograph taken. And I couldn't wait, because I was so nervous. When I got back the photos, they were all really blurred. I'd taken 2 photos, one on top of the other. So yeah, messed that up. But yeah. Well, that's right. You used to have to click on your photo, didn't you? On the film, you used to click it on, or you'd take a photo on top of another one. That's right. And also she came, didn't she, for the dictionary launch. And we talked about deaf clubs and photos and parties and snooker and families. Do we have anything more to say? Anything more from your photos, Alison, that you'd like to add? Well, my grandfather and great-grandfather are there. They were on the committee. My mother was there when she was young, and she'd go to a different deaf club first. But there was this snooker room. There was the men's room. There was a youth room upstairs where you could go. It used to be really quite crowded. my father lived in Bradford, and he would come across, and it would absolutely rammed. And my mother felt someone actually touching her, turned around and slapped them. And my father got slapped around his face. And actually, what he was doing was trying to get his wallet and put his wallet away. My mum thought she was trying to grope him because it was so jam packed in the room. So she slapped him around the face. And actually, from that moment, they ended up getting engaged. But it all happened at the Deaf Club. It was a really important place. It was like a second home for many of us. We'd go there rather than be at home. We'd be amongst our peers. We'd talk in our language. We'd meet, family, friends. Everyone was there, and it was our language and our culture, so important. And I think, in those days of oppression, the Deaf Club was the really important safe space. And now that we can go to theatres and places have subtitles and there's less oppression in our daily lives, I think it's become less important. And I think maybe that's why attendance at Deaf Clubs has dropped.
But I would say, from my perspective, what's interesting to me is that when we came, we didn't have membership cards or anything. Everybody just came, and everybody came regularly. And now people say it's too expensive. You have to be a member. You have to have a card. It's all very official. In those days, everybody just came in, and it's interesting.
We've got another comment that's just come in from one of our viewers, Laura. And Laura says, my parents met at the Deaf Club. They lived on opposite sides of Norfolk. That's a lovely story. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about attendance at Deaf Clubs and, how the room used to be so packed. Why do you think the Deaf Club was so important to people? Was it the social thing? Was it the language thing? Was it a place where people felt safe? I think it's like James said, James's father took him to the Deaf Club, which I think is astonishing. Absolutely kudos to James's father, because I'm not sure a lot of hearing people would have done the same thing at that time. So it's a place where we saw other deaf adults, I mean, a lot of people deaf kids in hearing families think they're going to grow up and become hearing. They don't know that there are other deaf people existing and other deaf adults existing. So that was the one space where you could go and do that. And I think that was so important. You could be introduced.
I know. I mean, whilst I grew up in a deaf family, I can remember going to the club, and it was the place where I could communicate with anybody. And if anybody who wasn't deaf came in, I wouldn't go near them because I just wanted to be around people I could use sign language with. And other people came from different family backgrounds, and they weren't as keen, and they were happy to do their little bits of finger spelling and not use the proper language. I wasn't interested in that. It was my language base. It was my people. I wanted to be around deaf people.
Sorry, James.
Yeah, interesting that you're saying that, because when I went along, if I went to pubs, they'd be full of other people. But nowadays, people are all signing. But if you could 3 deaf people in a room, and even playing bowls, if there's just a couple of us who are deaf and everybody's talking around you, it's not the same. When it was everybody using sign language in those contexts, it was different.
Yeah.
And, the Deaf Club was where we went to have that experience, to just be like everybody else. It was fabulous. Or we knew everybody would sign.
Yeah, and also, it was about personality as well, wasn't it? When you're with hearing people, your personality is kind of limited. You can't express yourself so well. You become quite quiet. Whereas at the Deaf Club, you could be the real you. I could be the real me. I could relax. I could talk about any topic. I could really express myself. But with hearing people, I would wait for them to lead the topic. I mean, if they signed, that was great, but not many hearing people at that time signed. So, you could get really in-depth conversations in the Deaf Club. You could talk about anything at all.
Totally agree, Alison.
Okay, let's add some more photos, and then we'll come back to them before we finish our session today. I mean, I grew up in Glasgow, so here's some photographs for you from there. Lovely. You saw the membership card there, which was, something that people were really proud of. But I don't think, do you have membership cards still now?
Yeah. We
We do
used
for the 50 plus. Yeah.
to, not anymore now. Yeah. We've talked about having them back. So there are cards, but we stopped for a while. Yeah.
Okay.
There are cards now. We did stop, but they're back to cards again now. Yeah. And I think it's important to have a sense of membership too.
I think lovely. What about you, Alison? Yeah, we get a card for the 50 plus. Yeah, it's like a present. But some other aspects of our Deaf Club are kind of going online. So you just get an email out, saying you need to renew your subscription. But I'm not sure about that. I like the old-fashioned pen and paper application.
Yeah, but online doesn't suit everybody. Not everybody has access to that. So I think it's an interesting change.
That's right. It's modern.
And the cards worked because everybody knew that they were part of something. I think when it goes online, it's easy to just forget that it's even there. You can ignore it.
I agree. And I think, yeah, often you get penalized, wouldn't you, for late renewal of your membership. So you'd be at the door, kind of £1, £2 at the door. Do you remember the same? Yeah. And you'd have to, sign in, and they'd look and check your card and see if your membership was live. I mean, wow. Yeah, visitors who came must know someone in the club. You had to vouch for the visitors, sign them in, put your name next to them on the register, and then you were kind of responsible for them. Well, you're supposed to be.
And also, you would have got someone saying, yes, do that for me as a member. But nowadays, that doesn't happen anymore because if people are coming in, it's just seeing that they're supportive. And so it used to be that the members, made all the decisions and we did everything. But you still get that out there. People will say, no, you can't because you're not a member. So it's interesting.
And I once forgot to pay my membership at the Deaf Club, and I went to buy a drink and they said, you can't, you're not a member. And I was so shocked. I was like, what? And they were saying, you've forgotten to remind, I mean, not gently, you've forgotten to remind you knew your membership. It was just like, you can't have a drink, you're not a member. Yeah. I mean, it was really strict, wasn't it? Pay first. There was no warm welcome. It was pay first and then we'll deal with it.
Well, yeah, that's the way it was.
Yeah. And I can remember the door at the Deaf Club, and people arguing and actually leaving Deaf Clubs because of, the door policy and issues they'd had at the door. I remember Halloween parties at mine. There were always competitions for best Halloween dress. Anything like that at yours?
Years ago, yeah.
My mum used to sew my costumes, spend ages sewing the costumes, and I was always so proud to wear it at Halloween.
Don't have those anymore now, though. Yeah, you might get a couple of people dressed up, younger ones, but that's it.
A few, yeah.
They do it for the fun of it, not because of what we did in the old days.
It was about the effort before, wasn't it? It was the time that you took, the stitching, the machining for, a week or 2 weeks beforehand to win the competition. People buy these things now, don't they? Kind of, very cheap and easy costumes. Yeah, my mother was fab at making costumes for me and my brother. We had all kinds of things, witches, all kinds of, she did masks for us and everything. She was really creative. Yeah, I can remember having a bowler hat with a moustache, and I was a jailbird at one time. And what else did she do? She made me the Pope. I'll never forget that because, the Catholic members weren't terribly happy. But yeah, it was really good fun and a great experience with the costumes. It was terrific. I don't know whether your Deaf Club had coach trips. Did you do coach trips? Oh, we did, yes.
Oh, yes.
We used to have loads of coach trips and massive coaches, and that seems to have gone now. I don't know whether people are more sedentary than they used to be, or what's that about?
Yes, of course. I mean, we would have had lots of it. We would have had 3 coaches.
3, wow.
And
where would you be going, James?
And we all went in convoy over to Edinburgh, stopped off for a meal, and then we went to North Berwick.
No, oh, sorry, did I catch that right? North Berwick. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you just toured around?
And then everybody got out and went and did their own thing. But 3 coaches, and now there's nobody going.
Wow, Alison, the same for the Leeds. We used to always have a children's trip growing up, and every year we take it in turns, whether it was Scarborough or Blackpool, Scarborough, and Bridlington. So Bridlington or Scarborough, and that was lovely. And I used to like the Bridlington one because there were slot machines and there are all kinds of fun fairs and things like that there. For the 50 plus group, we still often go. We go 3 or 4 trips a year. We're going soon to visit another deaf club. So we're going to the pub with them. There was a lot of mobility in the old days, wasn't there? I think people used to travel a lot from deaf clubs.
I mean,
Visits to other deaf clubs.
That we would have half-price trips to Blackpool, and we'd all go and coach to get there, and then we would stay over for a couple of nights. And it was all half-price travel, and everybody loved it. And then, even when they were there, people used to go off and do their own thing. It was great fun.
Yeah, we used to go on trips as well. I remember being in the coach, sitting on the back seat. Always sit on the back, best view, right? And some people would always have to be sick. You'd have to stop while somebody got off to be sick. Always used to happen. But that was news, right? And we used to play bingo on the coach.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right? I mean, can you imagine? You have to have seatbelts and everything. Now we didn't in the day. Everybody would be standing, signing to each other. We would all be playing bingo as we travelled. I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah, not allowed to do that now.
Yeah, we were all standing in the aisles, chatting, moving about, all signing to each other. Maybe that's why the coach trip stopped. I don't know.
Do you know that is a possibility?
But let's talk about sports. You go with a minibus, wouldn't you? Just sporting events. 4 or 5 times a week, we'd have home games, or Tuesday, something like that. We'd go out. That was away. And I don't know. I think it was always new, something new all the time. And we'd all have visitors, and you knew who the troublemakers were. And yeah, my father would go out and about. My brother and I would stay. We'd have a bottle of pop. We'd have some sweets. And my father would come and, we'd get some more pop, and that would be great. We'd be really happy when he went out, because we'd get pop and sweets. Yeah, and I always remember, 11 o'clock looking out the window and he'd be coming home. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Always the same, regular as clockwork.
Well, we organised football trips down to watch Liverpool. We got coaches in, and I can always remember the chat and the coach on the way there, and going in to watch the games. Went to get something to eat and have a drink. We went into Liverpool Deaf Club, met the guys there, and a lot of them used to have a bit of a drink. And then, I remember being told where to go to get the best drink and all that kind of thing. Initially, when we went, didn't know where to go. And then people were talking about changing their clothes. And then I went in around the corner where they told us to go. And there was this place that was actually a pub, which threw me. And I thought, well, let's go with it. And all these people came past. And because they were all, different color of skin, for us, it was really unusual. Wasn't used to that. And I remember seeing that for the first time. And just because it was new, being thrown back. And then as we were chatting, then someone else came out from Liverpool Deaf Club and said, "You're in the wrong place. That's where all the other people go. That don't go there. That's the wrong place." So we all had to follow our way out and realize we were in a club that was for people from different background than us as deaf people. And then we were back in with deaf people again.
Different times, James, different times, very different times. So in terms of deaf clubs, What do you think is the future of deaf clubs? What are your thoughts on that? Do you have concerns for your own deaf club?
Yeah, I really do. Because I think people are only interested in sitting on their phones and playing games or going out to the pub, not the club. I think we need to work harder at this and get them back.
Alison? Well, looking back to the old days, I think, you'd work in the same place, you'd go on holiday to the same place. And now people just don't live like that anymore. There are so many different opportunities. People go abroad for holidays, they leave one job, they take another one. They're not in the same job for 30 or 40 years. So our lives are very different. So we don't stay in the same place all the time. So I think that affects the future of deaf clubs. I think it might be in the future that deaf clubs become more peripatetic, I suppose, that we're renting a room here, renting a room there, that it's a sort of more fluid and mobile thing. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it will transform into the future.
And maybe, but I always remember that within the deaf club, you would have, for example, a social worker there, and you knew where they were, and they
Uh-huh.
could tell you where to go to get council staff or where to get the interpreter. And that's what I think was really important for us. If that helped, maybe the missioner before, but putting the social worker in the deaf club would help.
And like Alison said, there was no pressure from pubs, because we didn't mix in hearing pubs. Nobody went to them. So Kilmarnock Deaf Club, I mean, you have a good membership, but in the next 10, 15 years, what do you think might happen?
Who
Are you
knows?
worried about the future? Are you worried about the age of your current members?
Who knows, really? And I think because, you've talked about the welfare office and the welfare officers aren't there anymore. And as deaf individuals, we feel like we're taking on a lot more responsibility now for all sorts of different things. And there aren't the staff members coming in to talk to us in those places.
Alison, what do you think about Leeds? What are your hopes for the future? It's a hard one to answer, really, because I think we're struggling with funding. We're applying for funding. Um, the cost of living is rising for everyone. Charities are struggling. Um, so I think the government, knows that the whole of the charity sector is struggling, especially through, after COVID, cost of living, overseas wars, all of these things happening on the horizon. I think they all kind of amount to a struggling club, really.
Yeah, but I think with Kilmarnock, we still do have the board and we have a director on the board.
Oh,
And
okay.
because the board is there and we're both trustees, I think that's what enables us to keep it going for now because there is money, because we've been managing that. If it wasn't for a board, the structure wouldn't be there, but that structure is in place.
I think in the future we need to make sure that there's somebody who can oversee, really, that somebody can support, that if something, what seems to happen is clubs go into get into difficulties very quickly, and decisions have to be made very quickly, and then they're closed. So if there was some kind of umbrella organization or something that was overseeing deaf clubs, and if deaf clubs were able to collaborate with each other, and offer mutual support to each other so that they didn't feel so isolated, maybe if you could exchange information, advice, ideas, I think that might be really important, actually.
But I would say for those of us in the Ayrshire area, the problem is that people are now quite isolated in terms of where they live. They don't live close together anymore because the numbers are
Mm.
small. So it can be different then. And that's why the evening events don't happen as much. It's more in the afternoon. And that's partly because of geographical distances that there are now.
It's interesting. Deaf people used to just take it on the chin, didn't they? And just, if that was the event, they'd go, whatever the effort to get there. But it feels like those evening events are really declining, and there's more attendance in the afternoons.
I think people are afraid
Yeah,
to.
I think that's interesting. People stay in their houses more than they go out now, I think.
I think you're right. It used to be that we could do that, but it was fine before. You could be open to 12, half 12 at night. But with everything that's cut back, with this reduction in income, in numbers coming, everything's about being done during working hours, so it's in the afternoon.
And it depends on your area, doesn't it? It's a kind of postcode lottery, really, isn't it? Some people live in areas where the community is more isolated. Other areas have a more close geographical community. And I think in the past as well, we had lots of volunteers. And now people don't want to take those kinds of responsibilities. You know, you would go to the Deaf Club, you would give up your own time. It was like a full-time job for lots of people. And a lot of people were interested in doing that, but that seems to have gone by the way now, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know whether that's something to do with deaf schools as well, because deaf schools have lots of organizations now. They learn, all kinds of things. They do cake sales and, so they come out of schools with those skills. They're much more integrated. So they don't need the Deaf Club to teach them those skills. Everything is sort of done for them. And I think a lot of deaf kids now expect things to be provided. They don't necessarily feel the need to develop the skills that we used to develop at the Deaf Club.
I totally agree with that, because I remember I used to go out and support deaf children in mainstream settings of schools. And I can remember trying to get them to do things, but I could see that the families were overprotective and the families weren't letting them learn. And I think it's the families of deaf children who need to understand that for them to take responsibility on is good for them.
Is that about publicity and also welcoming people in? I don't know, food for thought, isn't it? Like, should we be working with schools to encourage them to bring their children to the Deaf Club? We can't just do it on our own as deaf people. We need to liaise with the parents, I think. It's very powerful.
Used to do that, but also, it's about supporting people who are taking these roles on now and letting them move on. But the parents, they're typically not deaf, and so that is changing things.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a mainstream school nearby us, and we asked a couple of the kids to come along and join us for a workshop making candles. And they were very nervous, obviously, but actually doing something with our hands helped. But I think they were amazed we were amazed because they just I think they spend so long on their phones these days. They text too much. They don't spend time sitting, chatting in sign language, do they?
I remember when BDA came over and wanted us to bring in deaf children to show what was going on. But I think that's what we need to think about the future of these children. And people think it's, if you talk about religion, they think, but we've talked about getting where you get married, where you've identified where it's going to be. And I think they need to understand all of that.
Well, folks, I have an eye on the time and we're over an hour. So I just want to ask you for a last comment, something that, you love the most about your Deaf Club, your second home, the place where you meet your friends and family. What's your fondest Deaf Club memory, Alison? I think you're right when you talked about the committees and the volunteers, because I think it's thanks to them that the deaf clubs are still going, and the ones that still are. So I think they're close to my heart, and I want to thank them all. Anyone who's in a committee or volunteering anywhere in the UK, well done you.
Absolutely. People like James here who've stayed as chair all these years, we wouldn't be here without that level of commitment. Thank you, James.
Yeah, well done, James. And James, from you?
I still have this passion for deaf people, and the OAPs are still around, but I just hope we can keep encouraging people to come to the club. And I want to keep it going, and I want the younger ones to come in so that they'll take over, and I really hope that will happen.
And you folks here are deaf role models, and for people out there to look at and to see that you have been so active as members of your committees, and that you've really kind of had the tenacity to keep your clubs going. So I would really like to thank you for your time tonight. I hope you've enjoyed talking about your stories and memories, and I hope that you'll be leaving this call tonight and going looking through your photo albums and thinking about your happy times in your deaf club. And to our audience tonight, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to tell other people in your deaf club how important the space is, and do whatever you can do to keep your deaf clubs going so that we have more beautiful memories and stories in the future. Thank you for your time, everyone. Good night.